The national championship game is set, and no matter who wins, we will be getting a first-time college football playoff champion. Michigan and Washington vying for it all. Sam Webb and Chris Fetters are here to break down the big game. Both teams trying to return to the mountaintop for the first time in roughly 3 decades. It would be Michigan's first title since 1997 and Washington's first since 1991. Both teams have won 14 games for the first time in school history and can finish the season a perfect 15-0. Kalen DeBoer, if he wins, would be the first coach to win the CFP in his first 2 seasons with the team. On the other sideline, we know Jim Harbaugh, all the suspensions, how he's continued to win through that. So, Chris, I'll start with you. As cliche as this is, what would a win mean for each program here?
Well, for Washington, it would be obviously the first recognized championship of the playoff era. Again, as you said, Grace, not since 1991 have they won a recognized national championship. It would be the third in their history to go with the one they won in 1960. And, obviously, Kalen DeBoer has just rocketed up the charts in terms of his star power. He's won basically every Coach of the Year award this year. And he's in the process of contract negotiations with new athletic director Troy Dannon. And Troy made no secret of the fact that one of his top priorities getting in as AD was to make sure that Kalen DeBoer got taken care of. He's making a little bit more than $4.2 or $4.3 million so far per season. We know that's going to at least double, if not more, and his assistants are going to get a huge bump as well. So there's a lot of ramifications that would happen with this game if Washington were to win their third national championship.
For Michigan, I think it would be, been trying to find the right word to characterize what this would be symbolic of for Jim Harbaugh and for Michigan under his watch. Because I think he's already fulfilled the promise of restoring Michigan. They had fallen far from grace before he got here, and he was charged with restoring it. And being a Super Bowl coach coming in, I think the expectation was that he'd get Michigan back competing for championships, that he'd make Michigan one of the top programs in the country. Again, I actually think he's already done that. I mean, Michigan's been, back-to-back Big Ten champions outright for the first time in its history, been to the playoff now 3 times in a row. But this would be the finish. He'd be finishing the job, Grace. And maybe I shouldn't use the word finish, or Michigan fans might stroke out for me saying that, because it might also mean him leaving. I don't think it guarantees that, but this would be them finishing the job of bringing the program back to former glory. And I think Michigan fans have been waiting a long time for that.
Now, taking a look at the Rose Bowl, Michigan didn't really have to respect Bama's receivers. They can't do the same thing against Washington with 3 NFL receivers over there. And then you have Michael Penix, who never gets sacked. So, Sam, how does Michigan stop this Washington passing attack?
Well, you start out by saying you aren't going to stop it. I mean, maybe you can have that as a goal, but I think more realistically, it's about slowing them down. Now, I have a ton of respect for Kalen DeBoer. I think that he is one of the brightest offensive minds in the game. Michael Penix, I was impressed with him when he was at Indiana. I remember he went down to Columbus and threw for 400 yards down there at Indiana. And so you knew he was a ball player, but he's taken it to another level at Washington. His ball placement is elite. He has big-time receivers. Dylan Johnson, we'll see what's going to be the case with him. Is he going to be available as a running back? But he has weapons all around him. So it's about slowing that down. And Michigan has been here before. I mean, they faced Ohio State with C.J. Stroud at quarterback, Chris Olave on one side, Garrett Wilson on the other side, Jackson Smith and Jigba running in the slot, and Marvin Harrison Jr., the all-everything receiver, was a freshman on that team. And, oh, by the way, you got Trevion Henderson in the backfield. So they've seen an offense like this. And so they know you don't stop an offense like this. You do have to challenge it. You can't give them a lot of space at receiver. You got to mix it in. You can't play off and let them get rid of the ball quickly all the time. You got to be willing to accept the challenge of getting up in those receivers' faces and allowing your pressure a chance to get there. And then offensively, your offense has to contribute to the defense. You got to run the football. You look at Michigan, when Ohio State had all those receivers, they ran the football down Ohio State's throat and limited some of the opportunities for that Ohio State offense. I think that's going to be part of the charge here in this game, is to run the football enough to limit possessions enough to not expose your defense as often as other defenses have been exposed.
Yeah, that's a ton, and Sam laid it out there really, really well. I think for Washington, clearly what Michael Penix did in the Sugar Bowl against Texas was unreal. I mean, going for 430, 2 touchdowns, both Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze going for over 120 yards each. Even Jack Westover had a huge game with some key catches to really help kind of propel that Washington offense. And really, I mean, it's as good as Michael Penix has been all year long, and he's been fantastic in the moments that have mattered. I mean, he had monster games against Oregon in both the games they played when they beat the Ducks up in Seattle, and then in the Pac-12 title game. He beat the head-to-head matchup with Caleb Williams at USC. And so he's had really, really huge moments, big stages, and nothing bigger than against Texas and New Orleans for going for 430 like he did. And the way he did it too, just the passes that he threw. And again, with an offensive line that just won the Joe Moore Award, held Texas to no sacks with their vaunted interior with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy II. They just had a phenomenal game as well, keeping Penix upright, keeping his jersey clean. And they're going to have to do a lot more of the same against even better Michigan defense than Texas. I mean, Michigan, if you look statistically, #1 defense in the country. So when you talk about a matchup, guys, when people want to see the best good on good matchup in the country, I find it hard to believe that there isn't going to be a better matchup than Washington's offense going up against Michigan's defense here in the national championship game. Should be something to watch.
Yeah, and let's not forget, as Sam alluded to, Penix did beat Michigan with Indiana. That was back in 2020, 38-21, the final score of that one. The quarterback on the other side here, J.J. McCarthy, he is 25-1 as a starter, with that only loss coming in last year's semifinal game to TCU. And when he's not on, he has Blake Corum to lean on, one of the best running backs in the country. So, Chris, how does Washington match up with this Michigan offense?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting matchup, Grace, because this is going to be the side of the ball that probably a lot of people aren't going to be talking about, but it is going to be just as pivotal. And I see a lot of comparisons maybe between J.J. McCarthy and the quarterback that Washington just saw in Quinn Ewers, statistically, style-wise, things like that, guys that are really, really solid, really accurate passers. More, I wouldn't say game managers, but guys that certainly know how to get the most out of the offenses that they have. And he does have a great running back in Blake Corum that can really help him balance up the offense and do some things in play action. And Washington's got to watch that, because they just saw it against Texas. Texas had a lot of success running the ball when they wanted to. And, the thing about Washington's defense is they're not going to wow you, other than Braylon Trice, who had an absolute monster game as the main edge player for the Huskies. It's kind of a no-name defense. It's not a defense that a lot of people nationally are going to pay attention to or recognize. But I'm telling you what, in the moments that matter, these guys make stops. They held Texas to 4 of 13 in 3rd and 4th downs. And Elijah Jackson, for instance, a great example of a guy. He gave up a touchdown to A.D. Mitchell earlier in the Sugar Bowl against Texas. And yet when it came up to be the biggest play so far in that game, the very final play with 1 second left, and everyone knew that Quinn Ewers was going to target A.D. Mitchell, his 6'4" receiver, Elijah Jackson was the one that came up and made the play to knock the ball away and win the game for the Huskies. So they have guys, and again, they're not going to be household name guys, but they have guys that can step up and make plays when it matters, can, hopefully limit this Michigan offense. Because I think this Michigan offense has a tendency to all of a sudden, it's like, okay, they'll run the ball a little bit, and then all of a sudden, boom, over the top, Roman Wilson or another speedster that'll come up and make a big play, or they'll go for a home run hit. So I think Washington needs to be able to kind of maintain things, kind of keep everything in front of them, force J.J. McCarthy to really engineer drives, and he's so good at it, but they have to keep him honest and really make them go the length of the field to be able to score points, because as we've seen with Washington's offense, they can score in bunches when they have the ball. So the key to the thing is Washington's got to get the ball back for Michael Penix and that offense. And they were able to get it back a couple times in the second half against Texas, and that was a huge key in that game.
Yeah, I've sensed in listening to the commentary, not necessarily Chris, but just in general, the commentary on JJ would put people in the mind of a game manager, and game manager in the way that people talk about game managers when they're talking about guys who you just want them to not lose the game. You just want them to lean on the defense or run the football. And I think the narrative that has persisted nationally doesn't take into account that JJ McCarthy was massively injured toward the end of the season. He got really banged up in the Penn State game to the point where he hardly practiced during the week leading up to the Maryland game. And I was talking to the quarterback coach during the media day, just trying to get a feel for inside. Now that it's over and he's better, how hurt was he? And he said he had tears in his eyes at halftime because he was in so much pain. I mean, they had to figure out ways that he obviously couldn't run the football. There were certain pass plays they couldn't even call because he couldn't put weight on one of his legs. And so, the last part of the season was about managing his usage. And then the last month was about getting him healthy enough to get back to the special type of performances that we were seeing early in the season that people were kind of writing off because of the level of competition. Well, this is his opportunity to really show that he's the special talent that people in Ann Arbor know he is. He has an elite arm. He runs an NFL offense. He's changing protections. He's making the checks. He's doing the things that NFL quarterbacks do. But, they have a running game that they're going to play to. So that is going to be big. The running game, I think, is going to be very, very key because they got to manage the game. They got to keep that Washington offense off the field. But there are going to be some moments where J.J. McCarthy has to show that he's a special quarterback, too. We know Michael Penix is special. Everyone has seen it. I think this is going to be a game where J.J. McCarthy, if Michigan wins it, is really going to show that he has that special ability as well.
Really great perspective on his injury there. Both these semifinal games, as fans, was all we could have hoped for, right? With drama coming down to the final seconds. However, for both Michigan and Washington, there were moments in those games where they could have given it away. So, Sam, what struggles did you see that need to be fixed by Monday?
Yeah, uncharacteristic, Grace. I want to start with special teams. I mean, Michigan missed an extra point. They missed the field goal. They muffed 2 punts. 1 punt led to a touchdown. The last muff punt, which was at the 1-yard line after Michigan had scored to tie it and got a stop that would have gotten them the ball with a minute left in regulation to go down and win it. But the muff punt wound up putting them at the 1-yard line to where you just got to try to run the clock out. So the special teams have got to be what the special teams were all season. And that was elite, lights out special teams, especially from the kicking standpoint. That has to be back in this game. And then the offense for maybe the first series or two of the game. And then early in the third quarter, we saw a lot of sloppiness, drop balls. There was an errant throw in there. Just the kinds of execution errors that are atypical for this team. So I actually think a week between games is good for the offense. I think the month layoff was good for their health, but not good for their efficiency. I think, playing that game, getting the kinks out, and getting right back on the field is really going to help them. And, Washington defensively, we've seen some teams really have some success being able to move the football on them. So I think going against the defense that's not Bama, that's not Iowa, that's not Ohio State or Penn State is really going to help them as well.
And Sam's right. I mean, obviously, if you looked at the Sugar Bowl and you saw the way that Texas was able to run the ball against the Huskies, now you're looking at a situation where they're going to be going up against a Jim Harbaugh-led offense that, Washington seen going all the way back to his days at Stanford and like the Andrew Luck era. And they would run those powers and counters to death until teams would show that they could stop them. And so this is a situation where in the Sugar Bowl with Steve Sarkisian, he wants to get up, he wants to throw the ball, he wants to be aggressive, and he's going to mix in the runs when he can. And even though Texas had really good success running the ball against Washington, they didn't stick with it. This is the team in Michigan I think would stick with it. If they found success with Corum and Edwards, they would keep pounding the ball with those guys and basically force Washington to go, you know what, you got to change your defense. We are going to keep doing this, and we are going to keep having success until you change your defense. And then once they do that, it's all bets are off. So I think Washington has certainly got to figure out what they're going to do in terms of stopping the run and force J.J. McCarthy to kind of get out there and beat him with his arm, which he can do. He's very accurate. And I think Sam has alluded to with the injuries and stuff, getting healthy again is a huge part of his game. But, they've got to put it on his arm. They've got to kind of force him into situations where he hasn't necessarily been comfortable. And so that's going to be a huge part of Washington kind of regrouping from the Sugar Bowl and game planning against this Michigan attack that I think will certainly lean on the run if they can a lot more than Texas did. And then the other thing is Washington's got to get healthy too. Sam alluded to J.J. McCarthy getting right. Well, Washington had potentially a huge injury scare at the very end of the Sugar Bowl with running back Dylan Johnson. Now, Ryan Grubb has come on Seattle radio this week and said that the x-rays were negative once they took their stuff in Houston. Everything was okay that way, and he's expected to play on Monday. So signs are pointing to good things with Dylan Johnson getting back in there. If they lose Dylan Johnson, that is a massive part of their offense, guys. That is just taking one leg out from under you, because they have Tybo Rogers, the true freshman that came in and did some nice things running the ball against Texas. Will Nixon came in there as well. And Ryan Grubb even mixed in a couple runs with the RPO and Michael Penix, who kind of carried the ball a few times against Texas for some really key gains. And he can, as Sam, I know, and the Michigan fans know from his days at Indiana, when he was healthy, he could run the ball a little bit. So maybe does Washington mix in a couple more runs with Michael Penix on Monday? Could happen. We could see that. But Dylan Johnson's health is absolutely massive for this game.
The last 5 college football playoff title games have been decided by double digits. Michigan opens this one as a 4.5-point favorite. We know Washington takes offense at that underdog label. And Chris, they thrive with that underdog label. So what's your key to getting a win here?
Yes, Grace, they certainly thrive off of it. It was interesting right after the Sugar Bowl win, Troy Fautanu made no bones out of the fact that they had been paying attention to what ESPN had been saying about basketball on grass with the Huskies and how they were perceived as soft and everything else that kind of went along with that. And so this team has been basically underdogs the entire season, and every win that they've been able to stack on wins, it feels like the disrespect keeps coming for them. And I'm talking about from their point of view. From the media point of view, I think they've gotten a ton of respect over the year. I think there's been a lot of people that have turned into believers in the national media as the season has gone on. Yet at the same time, Vegas keeps, making them underdogs and keeps betting against them. So I think they use that as fuel. I guarantee you the coaches use that as fuel. And so they'll just feed off that more and more and more. But of course, when you talk about a national championship type game, when you're talking about the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country, both unbeaten, Washington riding a 21-game winning streak, and Michigan looking to get back to where they expect to be, you're looking at all the cliches for the matchup. You're looking at third downs. You're looking at, who wins the game at the line of scrimmage, running the ball, stopping the run, getting the ball back. Sam mentioned special teams. I was shocked when I watched the Rose Bowl and I saw Michigan make some of those special teams errors, because that's just nothing you would expect to see out of a Jim Harbaugh coach team, for instance. So can there be some things in that special teams matchup that Washington can exploit? Because Grady Gross, who was recently put on scholarship as the place kicker at Washington, he had 3 key field goals in the Sugar Bowl. Could he have a couple more key field goals in the national championship game to really put the exclamation point on a Cinderella story, not just for Grady Gross, but for this entire Washington team? So I think it comes down to all of the typical cliched matchups that you would think of in terms of everything else. But ultimately, if I could point it down and boil it down to one key for Washington, it's that Michael Penix has to be Michael Penix. Because if you want to talk about a difference maker in this game on either side of the ball for either team, he is by far, I think, in my opinion, the one guy who can really dictate what happens in this game by himself. If he is what he was against Texas in the Sugar Bowl, He does the same types of things that he was able to do against that Longhorns defense, and he gets the same type of production out of Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jack Westover, Jalen McMillan, and some of those other guys, then I think that Washington stands an excellent chance of winning this national championship game.
Chris used the word dictate, and I think that is a great word for Michigan. Whose style is going to dictate how this game unfolds? Because you can fall into the trap. If you play a team like Washington and you get into a track meet, you're going to get beat. If this is a game that's in the 40s, Michigan can certainly play that way, but it's not their best chance to win. I think their best chance to win is if they can dictate the style of this game with their running game. You run the football, you establish your physicality, you protect your defense to the point where, I'll get back to what I said earlier, you don't expose them. You give Washington the number of possessions and snaps that they've gotten all season long. The number one defense in the country is going to have a bad day. So you do your part as your Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, that offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award the last 2 years prior to this one. Now you're putting that defense in position where they're fresh, where some of the things that they're going to come up with. Jesse Minter is an outstanding defensive coordinator. I think he coached circles around the offensive staff from Alabama in this last game with some of the pressures that he brought that they hadn't seen before when they played Ohio State. Remember Marvin Harrison Jr. talking about some coverages he's never seen before. There are only so many new coverages and blitzes that you can bring, which is why I say you got to keep the possessions and the snaps down, keep them manageable. And then defense, while you're out there, you got to be willing to accept the challenge. You cannot play off of these guys all game long. You can't spot drop against these guys all game long. They thrive on getting the ball out quickly. You got to do things that disrupt them, that confuse them some, and move on when they have some success, because they're going to have some of that. You do those things and you run the football the way that I think Michigan's going to be able to, and then finish with J.J. McCarthy showing that he's special too. I'm going to come back to that. I think J.J. McCarthy is a top 10 NFL talent. But the way the season has unfolded, I don't know how many scouts or NFL teams you have out there saying that. This is a game where he can really show that. Elite arm, elite downfield passer. There are going to be some opportunities, and they're going to have to capitalize on them. If they do that, if they manage this game with their running game especially, and then the defense does what I was talking about, and J.J. McCarthy has his special moments, I think Michigan will win this game.
All right, Washington and Michigan, two of the best storylines in college football all season long, meeting for the title Monday night in Houston. Sam and Chris, thanks so much for previewing the game. And for more championship coverage, be sure to check out dogman.com and the Michigan Insider for all your Michigan and Washington football and recruiting news all year long.